Mr. Prime Minister, welcome to Alberta's capital city. We'd also like to welcome listeners joining us this morning across the Chorus Radio Network, including News Talk 770 in Calgary. Mr. Trudeau, a year ago, our unemployment rate here in Edmonton was 4.9%. Today, it's up shy of about 2 points to 6.8%. Yet Edmonton, the only jurisdiction in the province excluded from recent enhancements to employment insurance. Yesterday in Calgary, you said that residents in this city should be pleased. They've not been hit as hard as other parts of the country. How are out-of-work Edmontonians supposed to accept your government's seemingly subjective approach to EI?
Actually, it's not subjective at all, and enhancements we've made to EI will address the entire country, including in Edmonton. We've shortened the waiting period from 2 weeks to 1 week. We've made it easier for re-entrants to the job market and new entrants to the job market to access EI, and we've strengthened the work-sharing program. So there's a lot of things that we've done in improving EI that will have an impact on families suffering here in Edmonton. On top of that, our budget is investing in infrastructure that Don Iveson's been asking for. It's been investing in putting more money in the pockets of families with the Canada Child Benefit. So there's a lot of things that we're doing for people in Edmonton that will make a big difference. Now, there is a recognition that some areas in this country are especially hard hit with the downturn in oil prices and in the challenges facing it. And there's actually 12 places across the country that have been identified and calculated as being hardest hit, and that's where we are giving 5 more weeks of EI to those places. Now, 3 of the 4 EI regions in Alberta are getting that help. Edmonton right now is doing better than those places, and I know that's cold comfort to families who are struggling and suffering, but there are far fewer of them here in Edmonton than in other parts of the country, and that's why we're trying to focus on what Canada has always done, which is give the best help to the people who need it.
Our Premier Rachel Notley says she's disappointed that Edmonton was excluded from the bump up to EI. Our Mayor Don Iveson has echoed those sentiments. Is this visit to Edmonton, a city that sent 2 Liberal MPs to Ottawa this past federal election, a form of damage control?
Oh, no. I was in Calgary yesterday, and the fact is that people in Edmonton and across Alberta know that I come out here every few months and have been since I first got elected back in 2008. For me, making sure that we're listening to the challenges people are facing, aware of it, and working hard to try and solve and build for a better future requires me to come out and meet with people and listen to concerns they have as much as I possibly can.
You've committed to, in your words, securing social license for responsible projects when it comes to pipeline approvals. What does social license mean, and who grants it?
Well, one of the things that we've seen over the past years is the lack of understanding by the government that you have to build both a growing economy and a protected environment at the same time, that it's not an either-or choice, left a lot of people feeling like the only way they could protect the environment was to say no to everything they possibly could. And Canadians lost trust in government's capacity to do both a strong environment and a protected and a strong economy at the same time. What we have to do is restore people's confidence that projects that are approved by the federal government will meet the concerns that people have for the long term for their kids. And that's no different from the way I've talked and I've heard from Albertans about this over the past years. They need to know that, yes, we're growing the economy, but in ways that are going to leave good jobs and a good future for their kids.
We asked our listeners to submit questions for you, Mr. Prime Minister. Joanne wants to know if it's French's or Heinz ketchup in your refrigerator.
I think Sophie goes for some organic biological stuff, but I'm a Montrealer, so it's always been the yellow French's mustard on my smoked meat sandwiches.
Joanne suggested to me that this may be a good segue to talk to you about buying Canadian, namely Canadian energy. Why is it okay for Eastern Canada to import oil from countries like Saudi Arabia and Nigeria, yet speak out against getting Canadian resources to market?
Well, that aspect of speaking out against is something that I'm working very, very hard to quell. I mean, whether it's Westerners frustrated at something the East is doing, or Easterners frustrated at something the West wants, it's time we understood that we're all in this together, and that over the past 10 years, Alberta has contributed immensely to growing the Canadian economy. And right now that Alberta and other regions are facing a tough time, it's important that Canada be there to give people the support and the help they need. This is the way the country works, and regional fighting and exacerbating of differences, quite frankly, doesn't build a stronger economy or a stronger future for anyone.
How does a moratorium on tanker traffic along Canada's west coast build a stronger economy?
Actually, the northwest Pacific coast in BC has been long seen to be an area where it's not just vulnerable ecosystems, but it's also a lot of about 20,000 British Columbians who make their living off of tourism, off of fishing, off of the delicate waters and the productive waters of the BC's north coast. So recognizing that there are places where you really shouldn't be putting a pipeline or specifically super tankers. I mean, I've talked with native leaders and communities who said, look, LNG pipelines we're fine with. Even though we don't make any benefits from them, the environmental impacts are significantly less for LNG than they would be for crude or bitumen. So the concern that people have is really measured, because everyone knows we need to grow the economy. We just need to not be putting at risk our children's futures at the same time.
Mr. Prime Minister, would you consider implementing a moratorium on East Coast tanker traffic?
Listen, as in any situation, we're going to listen to both science and to concerned citizens and talk about how to build a stronger future in which we're rejecting the idea that you have to choose between what's good for the environment or what's good for the economy. How we build a stronger future is building the both together.
You campaigned on a commitment to run $10 billion deficits over the next several years. Your first budget flirts with a deficit of $30 billion. How is this anything but a broken campaign promise?
The campaign promise we made featured about $10 billion worth of new investments. Investments in money to families, in infrastructure, in strengthening programs that are going to help our seniors. These are the kinds of things that we committed to, and that's exactly what we're doing in this budget. The economy got significantly worse. We had $10 billion of investment on what was going to be around balance, slightly in the negative, but not significantly so. And now suddenly we're at negative 18. So our question was, do we scale back on our investments? Do we go for cuts right now instead of investing in our communities and giving money to people who need it to spend to grow the economy? Or do we continue to do that and know that that will set us on a path to growth? Canadians were very clear in the last election. They didn't want cuts to balance the budget at all costs, which the Conservatives and the NDP were offering. They wanted the investments we were proposing because they know, like we know, that what the economy needs is growth. And confident, optimistic communities are always willing to invest in their future. That's what we're doing.
Your Infrastructure and Communities Minister, Amarjeet Sohi, obviously hails from right here in Edmonton. You're trumpeting infrastructure investment as a key pillar of your first budget. What specific investments should Edmontonians be excited about?
Well, they should be excited about the projects that your great Mayor Don Iveson and the Premier have highlighted. The one thing that I think people have gotten wrong in the past is the federal government shouldn't be in the business of drawing lines, subway lines or roads on a map. We shouldn't be in the business of saying, well, this is a ride and we want an LRT through, and that one is not important for us politically, because that always happens. Let's trust the people on the ground to pick what's best for Edmontonians and for the growth of this economy, and we'll work as partners, making sure the money is there so we can build a stronger city and a stronger future.
You've condemned recent terrorist attacks in both Belgium and Pakistan. A listener by the name of Dawn wants to know how you'll protect Canadians from Islamic State.
Well, we've always recognized that Canadians expect us to do two things: keep us safe in our communities and uphold the values and freedoms that we cherish as Canadians. And that's exactly the approach that we're doing. We're making sure that our police organizations and intelligence services have the tools they need, but also that privacy and rights of Canadians are being upheld. On our new mission against ISIS, for example, we're actually strengthening the training on the ground, because we know that this war and this fight against ISIS needs to be stopped by engaging on the ground and not just by dropping bombs. But we've also stepped up our intelligence gathering services, because that's going to be an important part of the fight against ISIS and how we keep ourselves safe here.
You'll depart Edmonton directly for Washington, D.C., where you'll take part in the Nuclear Security Summit. Are you concerned about nuclear terrorism, and do you ultimately envision a world without nuclear weapons?
Well, I think everyone is concerned about nuclear weapons. I think one of the things we've seen around failed states, around the virulence and the resources of terrorist organizations is there is a nightmare scenario in which terrorists could get their hands on a dirty bomb or a nuclear weapon. And I commend President Obama for his initiative that has brought the global community together 4 different times. This will be the 4th and last time to talk about nuclear security as a really important thing, but that combines both weapons and nuclear power plants and the entire way we're going to both keep Canadians and the people of the planet safe.
Prime Minister Trudeau, a listener by the name of Daniel would like to know when marijuana will be legal and available for purchase in Canada. He'd also like to know if regulations will be provincially or federally mandated.
Well, the priority we put forward on marijuana was, first of all, to protect underage Canadians from having such easy access as they do now. We're the number 1 country of 29 different developed countries in terms of access by underage minors to marijuana. So it needs to be harder for them to access, and we need to remove it as a source of revenue for gun runners, street gangs, and organized crime. So that's the focus we're taking. We're looking at what is being done south of the border, and it'll be coming. We're working on it right now. We have former Police Chief Bill Blair working on that very attentively, and when we have the right solution, we'll put it forward. But I'm expecting that to come, in the not too distant future, because it's a serious commitment that we made because we need to protect Canadians. Obviously, when you go to regulate cigarettes or alcohol or things like that, working with the provinces is essential, and I see no difference with marijuana on that, and I look forward to a variety of perspectives and engagements by provincial governments.
If and when marijuana is legal, will you smoke it?
I'm not much of a smoker. I never have been, and actually, it's funny because my friends tease me now that I was always the stick in the mud and the straightest of all of them when it came to drinking or drugs and everything. And now, I'm supposedly the big pothead, and it just makes them laugh, and it makes me laugh as well. But it's a responsible thing to do, to respect people's choices. I've never been much of a substance taker.
Mr. Trudeau, in closing. Aside from EI and pipelines, the most common question that listeners submitted, quite simply, what do you make of Donald Trump?
I think it's very much a symptom of the kind of frustration that Americans have with their political system that has grown less and less in touch, in which big money has a stronger and stronger role, and they're looking to lash out outside of the establishment candidates. I think that by the time the election rolls around, the discourse might be very, very different from what we're seeing right now in the media in the U.S. But as I've said from the very beginning, I look forward to working with whoever Americans choose because I know there's so much common ground between Canada and the U.S., so many initiatives we can work well together on in our mutual interest that's going to be where we go.
The Right Honourable Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, we want to thank you for joining us here this morning in the 6:30 CHED studio.
Real pleasure, Ryan.